In the village of Ubaha, there lived a man named Nduka, known far and wide as the best meat seller in the entire region. People flocked to his stall at the village market because the meat he sold was always fresh, tender, and oddly sweet. What the villagers didn't know was that Nduka's meat was not just any meat, it was cursed. Hidden beneath his charm and generous nature was a dark secret tied to an occult pact he had made. Nduka had an unhealing wound on his leg, which he explained away as nothing more than a bacterial infection.
It will heal in time,
he would tell the villagers who pitied him.
It's nothing to worry about.
His customers often asked about his wound, and Nduka would smile softly, pretending to be humble, and they would feel sorry for him. Some would even give him herbs or ointment to help with the pain. Little did they know, this wound was no ordinary injury. It was the source of his dark power. Years ago, Nduka had joined a secret occult group, and as a requirement of his initiation, he was cursed with a wound that will never heal. But in exchange, he was granted power, wealth, and influence over the lives of the villagers. Nduka would take small pieces of flesh from the festering wound on his leg, make incantations over them, and through his dark acts, those small pieces would multiply into large portions of meat for sale. His customers, unaware of the true nature of the meat, would buy and consume it, setting off a chain of misfortune in their lives. Women who ate his meat became barren, men turned to drunkenness, and children grew sickly. The village elders and leaders started dying mysteriously, one after the other. Nduka reveled in their misery. He would laugh alone in his house, savoring the chaos that his cursed meat had caused. The more they suffered, the stronger he became, and the wealthier his business grew. Despite the presence of other meat sellers in the village, it was Nduka who had the most customers, for his meat had a way of drawing people in as if enchanted. One day, Kamsi, the greatest farmer in Ubaha, found himself at Nduka's store. Kamsi had always grown the best crops and had never needed to buy meat from the market because he raised his own livestock. But that day, something was different. As he walked past Nduka's store, the smell of the meat was irresistible, and despite not having much money left, he was drawn to buy a large portion. He handed over the last money he had and carried the meat home. Kamsi gave the meat to his wife, Norma, who prepared a delicious egusi soup with it. The whole family ate the meal together, enjoying every bite, unaware of the darkness that had entered their home. The next morning, Kamsi and his wife went to the farm as usual, only to discover that termites had devoured all their crops. In shock, Kamsi let out a loud scream and collapsed. By the time help arrived, Kamsi was dead. The villagers passing by carried his body home and he was buried that same day. News of Kamsi's sudden death spread quickly. The villagers were in disbelief, for Kamsi had been known for his healthy crops and strong constitution. No one could explain why he had died so suddenly. Meanwhile, Nduka, upon hearing the news, smiled to himself. His demons had claimed another victim, and he knew that more power would soon be his. That night, Nduka attended a secret meeting with his occult brothers. They celebrated Kamsi's death, and Nduka was rewarded with more wealth and power for his role in spreading misfortune. The misfortunes in Ubaha continued, with more families falling victims to mysterious death, barren women, and sickness. Yet, no one suspected that Nduka, the meat seller they trusted, was the cause of their suffering. Nduka's pretentious kindness continued. He would often approach grieving families, offering them free meat, pretending to be a sympathetic figure. Even the royal family was not spared. The king's third wife had died mysteriously after Nduka had given her a large portion of meat as a gift for the New Yam festival. The village mourned her loss, and Nduka had been among the first to offer his condolences, though inside he was rejoicing in yet another successful act of evil. In the midst of all this suffering, there was a young man named Amaku. He had recently moved to Ubaha after losing his wife and child to leprosy in his father's village. Amaku came to live in the hut of his late mother near Nduka's home. He kept to himself and lived a simple life, surviving on the little produce from the small farm he started behind his hut. One afternoon, Amaku climbed a palm tree in his compound to harvest palm fruit. From the top of the tree, he had a clear view of Nduka's yard. Out of curiosity, he watched as Nduka pulled out a sharp knife, exposing his wounded leg. To Amaku's horror, Nduka cut a piece of flesh from his leg, smiled in satisfaction, and placed the flesh on a table. He then began to chant strange incantations, and right before Amaku's eyes, the small piece of flesh expanded into a large slab of meat. Amaku, frozen, his heart racing, he quickly climbed down the tree and ran into his hut, his mind reeling with what he had just witnessed. That night, he prayed for wisdom and guidance, asking God to show him how to expose Nduka's evil without putting his own life at risk. The following weeks were tense for Amaku as he silently observed Nduka's action from a distance. He saw how Nduka continued to sell his cursed meat and how families who consumed it fell deeper into misfortune. But Amaku knew that simply accusing Nduka without proof would be dangerous, as the meat seller was well respected and feared in the village. Then came the day of the village grand festival. Nduka, in his usual fashion, distributed large portions of meat to many families, including the village elders. Amaku knew that if something wasn't done soon, more people would die. With a heart full of courage, Amaku went to the village chief and told him everything he had seen. At first, the chief was hesitant to believe such an outrageous claim. But after hearing Amaku's detailed account of Nduka's actions and considering the strange patterns of death and misfortune in the village, the chief agreed to take action. The village gathered for a council meeting the next day, and Nduka was summoned. Amaku stood before the crowd, trembling but resolute, and recounted what he had seen Nduka do in his yard. The villagers gasped in horror, and murmurs of disbelief spread through the crowd. Nduka, at first, tried to deny everything, claiming Amaku was lying. But the village chief pressed him further, and the villagers began to connect the dots. the misfortunes, the deaths, the strange wound that never healed. Faced with growing suspicion, Nduka's demeanor changed. His eyes darkened and a sinister smile spread across his face.
Yes,
He confessed, his voice dripping with malice.
I have caused you all. I made you suffer, made your daughters barren, turned your sons into drunkards, and brought death to your footstep. Every piece of meat you ate was part of me, part of my power.
The crowd erupted in shock and fear. Nduka laughed bitterly.
But you have only heard the beginning of my story.
He sneered.
There is more, much more than you know. And soon, you will all learn why I did this. You understand the true reason behind the curse I have placed on this village.
Before anyone could react, Nduka was seized and restrained by the village guards. The villagers, shaken by his confession, watched in stunned silence as he was led away. But his final words hung heavily in the air, leaving them with an unsettling feeling that this was far from over. As Nduka was dragged off to face punishment, Amako and the others knew that a deeper, darker secret was yet to be uncovered, a secret that would change the fate of Ubaha forever. Thank you for watching. Please stay put and wait for the part 2 of the story. Do not forget to subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss these amazing stories. And please turn on your notification button so you know when next we drop another story. Thank you and be blessed.